Hello and welcome to today's video. In today's video I'm going to be going through some audiobooks that I've listened to and that I would recommend. Now, I've only got into audiobooks this year, so these are 10 audiobooks that I've listened to and I would recommend. However, I'm also going to give the star rating that I gave to the individual books, because just because I really enjoyed the audiobook doesn't mean it was a 5-star book. It just means I personally believe that, at least for me, the audiobook was the best way to consume it, and really enjoyed how the audiobook was. And then there are also a lot of books that are said to be these amazing audiobooks, completely amazing, you should definitely listen to, but if I haven't listened to them, I'm not recommending them. So that's why some that you might expect to be on a list like this, you're probably not going to see, just because if I haven't listened to them, I can't recommend them. And on that same sort of note, if you do have any recommendations, then do leave them below. Let me know what audiobooks you would recommend. But yeah, without further ado, I think it's time to just get into the recommendations. And this is in no particular order. I was going to try and order it through genre, but there's not really many genres that can be lumped together, so this is just completely random, just kind of the order I've wrote them down in. There's no real order to them at all. My cat is also after attention, so I am brushing him off to the side whilst recording this. So recommendation number 1 is No One Is Too Small to Make a Difference by Greta Thunberg. I gave this book 5 stars. It's non-fiction, it's a very short little book. I think it's only about an hour-long audiobook. It's a collection of her speeches basically that she's given at different conferences and different events. I'd read the physical copy a couple of years ago, and then I've also listened to it this year, and honestly it was really good. It was actually narrated by her, by Greta Thunberg, so it really is essentially her giving her speeches, but obviously they've been collated into this book, and yeah, would 100% recommend. And I listened to that one on Borrowbox, which is a free service provided through my local library. I think most local libraries provide a free audiobook service either through Borrowbox or Libby, or I think there's a few others, so yeah, definitely check out your local libraries because Borrowbox is really good. I really would recommend. So then recommendation number 2 is Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams. Again, listened to on Borrowbox, and I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed the story and it was really interesting. It is a contemporary with mental health representation throughout it, and it was really good. The reason I like the audiobook version of this so much is because it really felt like you were there and listening to the story. I had actually, before listening to it as an audiobook, I'd read the first chapter when I got the book, and I enjoyed it, but I wasn't ready to pick it up and properly read it. But through the audiobook it really was just easy to keep listening, and it really did draw you in and keep your attention held, so really enjoyed that one. And again, that one was listened to through Borrowbox. My third recommendation is a book I didn't particularly enjoy. So third recommendation is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Again, listened to through Borrowbox and gave it 3.5 stars, which I think is quite a generous rating, to be honest. I didn't massively enjoy it, but it is a classic, and it's a dystopian classic. It's very much an original classical dystopian book. I really am glad that I've read this. It is a classic, and I think it is important to see where these worlds that we get now today in these books that are continuously coming out not came from, but kind of how that all started and how that type of writing started. But I don't think I would have finished the book if it wasn't for the audiobook, and that is why I think it was such a good audiobook, because it did grip me enough to keep me listening. But it was really good, and I did enjoy the listening experience of listening to the audiobook. So if The Handmaid's Tale is something you want to read, would recommend the audiobook. Recommendation number 4 is The Switch by Beth O'Leary. I gave this one 4 stars. Again, listened to it through Borrowbox, and this is a contemporary romance book, and Beth O'Leary has become quite popular the last couple of years for the books that she writes, and I really enjoyed it. So The Switch is a dual perspective book, and we get 2 narrators, so a narrator for the young woman in the book and a narrator for the like 80 something year old woman in the book, and it was really good. It was so interesting, and obviously I read it audibly, so I don't know if it would be the same if I read it physically, but I genuinely loved hearing both perspectives. I feel like most of the time in Jules' perspective books there's one that you prefer, or there's one that you kind of like waiting to finish to get back to the one you really liked, but I really enjoyed both perspectives here. And I think the actual like voice actors, like the narrators for the book that were picked really well. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, and I would 100% recommend the audiobook version if you wanted to read it. Then recommendation number 5 I would say is The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary. However, I would say maybe actually listen to this one before the Switch. Personally, I preferred the Switch. I gave them both 4 stars. This is also a 4-star rating, and also listened to from Borrowbox, and also a contemporary romance. But The Flat Share is their share a flat, but they've never met. One of them sleeps there in the day, one of them over night time. They've never met, but it's a contemporary romance, so I'm sure you know where it goes. But yeah, I gave it 4 stars still. It was still, star rating wise, like return wise, it was still just as good as the Switch, but I preferred the storyline and the like what was going on in the Switch. But I would 100% recommend the audiobook for The Flat Share. It was really good. Again, dual perspective, so we've got 2 narrators, and I really enjoyed it. Then recommendation number 6, I'm going to recommend one book, which is the first book in a series, but I actually listened to the entire series using audiobooks. I really enjoyed it. So this is Shiva by Maggie Stevewater, and the entire series is the Wolves of Mercy Falls series. I listened to this on Scribd. I believe they've got like, there's 4 books in the series, and I think they've got 3 of them on Scribd. So listen to that and really enjoyed it. The narrators were really good. It was dual perspective, but for the first book, and then for the rest of the books it was like multiple perspectives. Really good. And the narrators did a really good job at making it very easy to tell who you were listening to. Like, it's one of those that I could pause it mid-chapter if I really needed to and go back to it and would know where I am, like would know exactly who I'm listening to. And it was really good. So this is a YA fantasy romance series, and I found the audiobooks really amazing for it. It was the first fantasy that I'd listened to through an audiobook rather than reading physically, and I was really honestly impressed. I still haven't listened to an adult fantasy this way, but you know, someday I hope I will. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good, and it was told really well. The first book in the series I gave 3.5 stars, and I think book 2 and 3 got a bit less, but then book 4 was really amazing. So yeah, would really recommend the series. And if you are going to read it, I would recommend reading it as an audiobook. Then recommendation number 7 is yet again a series, but I'm just going to mainly recommend the first books. This is Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard, and it is the Red Queen series. I haven't finished this series yet, but book 1, 2 and 3 I've listened to via audiobook, and also the short story collection. So I still haven't read books 4 or 4.5, but I'm assuming they're just as good. So I would recommend the whole series, but I'm assuming the last 2 are going to be just as good. And yeah, this is a YA fantasy series, and I gave the first book 4.5 stars. It is truly amazing, and the audiobook is done so well. It really builds the world in a way that I think is really good. And what I like about this one is the audiobook and reading physically seem to mesh quite well together for me. So I can read it through an audiobook, and then if I'm taking the book out with me, I can read it physically still, which is something that I do struggle with a lot of books. I need to read it one way or the other, but for this one it works really well, and I really enjoy the narrator. And yeah, this series is, first of all, amazing. If you haven't read it, because I'm smashing through it, love it. But the audiobooks for it are also so good. It's quite an, it's not super old, but it's about 10 years old, the series. So you know, the audiobooks have been out for some time, so I was a bit worried about them, but no, they're like just as good as like newer audiobooks that are coming out every year. And you really you get immersed in it. Listening to it as an audiobook, you are fully immersed in this world that you're reading. Like, you know, I'm someone who like can picture the world as I'm reading, so as I'm reading it happens in images in my head. And the audiobooks for this is just, yeah, really loving it. Really loving it. Then recommendation number 8 is Solitaire by Alice Osman. Again, I listened to this one on Scribd and I gave it 3 stars. This is a YA contemporary and it was done really well. We follow Tori and there's a little bit of romance in there but not really, and it's basically a bit of like a mystery book. I haven't listened to a proper mystery or thriller as an audiobook yet, but that is something I want to try out as well. But I feel like this was a very good introduction into like that and doing that, and it was done really good. The narrator was really good, the story was really good, and having it told through the narrator really added an extra level of depth on it for me. There's not much more to say about that one, but yeah. Recommendation number 9 is This Winter by Alice Osman, and again, listen to this through Scribd and I gave it 4 stars, but this is the only one I would say listen to it through an audiobook. It is an amazing audiobook. We follow the like spring siblings, so we see a bit from Charlie's perspective, a bit from Tori's perspective, and a bit from Oliver's perspective, and each of those has a different narrator in the audiobook, and it's super short. It's like a little novella, but I would say if you're going to read it, have either a physical copy or like an ebook or PDF or something, just because the illustrations in this book were really amazing. And like I 100% love listening to the audiobook for this. I assume I'd prefer it to reading it physically. It was a really amazing audiobook, done really well with really good narrators, but I just wanted to also see the illustration, so I did have the physical book next to me and I just like flick the pages as we were going, so I wasn't reading along with it, but I was like looking at the different illustration and the artwork for it, and I would recommend doing that just because of how cute and how nice, and yeah, the illustrations are great, so would recommend doing it that way. Then last but not least, recommendation number 10 is Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. I gave this 4 stars. This was a reread for me and I 100% preferred the audiobook to the physical book. And this is one that I listened to but also read along with as I was listening to it, and it really just kept me going. I sped through it. The narration was so good that it like kept you wanting to read. Like, you get to the end of the chapter but you'd be ready to continue reading it, and it was just done really well. I really enjoyed it. It's a YA fantasy book and it's in like the Shadowhunter universe. It's not the original series, but it's the next trilogy on from the original series, if that makes sense. I'm pretty sure you can read the series in any order, so it doesn't really matter if you've read the others or not. But yeah, listen to this on Scribd. Scribd has a lot of the Shadowhunter world books on there, but it doesn't have the original series. I do wish I could have listened to that one on there as well, but unfortunately it doesn't have it. But yeah, really enjoyed Clockwork Angel, gave it 4 stars, and that was as a reread, so I think I probably gave it more when I originally read it when I was like 14, 15, but it's 10 years later now, but it still got 4 stars and it was really good and I really enjoyed the audiobook. Those are my audiobook recommendations. Obviously these are very catered to me and my reading style. I've only got into audiobooks this year, so I'm not super like in the know and I haven't listened to loads, but I'm really getting into them and really enjoying them, and these are just 10 audiobooks that I've really enjoyed this year. So yeah, I do hope that they helped. I hope that you found something new to listen to. And yeah, if you liked the video, please do give it a like. Subscribe down below if you would like to see more. I do upload every Tuesday and Friday. And yeah, hopefully I will see you next time. Bye.